Tonight, 1 week until the final votes of the 2024 election are cast.
We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work is joyful work. And make no mistake, we will win. We will win.
As Vice President Kamala Harris addresses a crowd of supporters in Washington, standing at the site of former President Donald Trump's infamous January 6th speech, Trump hosts his own press conference bashing Harris on everything from immigration to inflation and more. Plus,
the love in that room, it was breathtaking, and you could have filled it many, many times with the people that were unable to get in.
It was a major moment of former President Trump's Madison Square Garden event this weekend, but for Trump, it was all just, quote, love in the room. Why the former president isn't backing away from the controversial comments made on that MSG stage, and why he called an impromptu press conference just hours before Vice President Harris's major speech in Washington. And
personally, I don't understand it. You know, I did have a little faith in politics, but I don't have no faith in politics now. No one can't be trusted.
It's a symbol of democracy in America, the polling place. But in the past decade, more than 25,000 have vanished. The troubling trend and what it means for the right to vote for millions of voters when we take a look at protecting your vote. Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis here in the nation's capital. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We begin tonight with the race for the White House. 1 week from tonight, the first polls will be closing in states across the country. More than 51 million Americans have already voted all across this country. Take a look at the lines here in Washington, D.C. today. And tonight, the candidates are making their final pitches to the American people. Just moments from now, Vice President Kamala Harris will deliver her closing argument speech on the ellipse near the White House, where former President Donald Trump spoke on January 6th. We'll bring it to you live. Tens of thousands are expected to be in attendance tonight to hear the vice president speak. Earlier today, Harris went over her speech with members of her staff. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump appeared so far today at events in Florida and Pennsylvania. He's set to speak in Allentown in just a few moments. Pennsylvania with nearly 500,000 Puerto Ricans. And Trump has a new take on his own closing argument. That rally at Madison Square Garden, he called it a love fest today. 7 days until election. Many are calling the most consequential of our lifetimes. We have you covered. We begin with our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, from the Ellipse in Washington.
Tonight, thousands upon thousands lining up in Washington to hear Vice President Kamala Harris deliver her closing argument, with Election Day now just 1 week away. Harris seen here practicing the speech with her team, this morning saying she's ready.
We are a week out, and I'm in the zone, right? We got to cover a lot of ground. There's still a lot of people to talk with, and so I am traveling all over the country, in particular the swing states, to talk with folks and organize them and remind folks of the power of their vote.
The campaign choosing the location carefully. Harris speaking on the Ellipse, the exact same site where Donald Trump addressed his supporters before they attacked the Capitol on January 6th.
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
According to excerpts of the speech, Harris tonight will argue Trump's priorities for a second term are clear, saying he has an enemies list of people he intends to prosecute, and noting one of his highest priorities is to set free the violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers on January 6th. Harris will say Trump is not a candidate for president who is thinking about how to make your life better, amplifying the case she's been making out on the campaign trail.
So much is on the line in this election, and this is not 2016 or 2020. We can all see that Donald Trump is even more unstable and more unhinged, and now he wants unchecked power. And this time, there will be no one there to stop him. Not even the Supreme Court.
And tonight, she'll paint a vivid picture for voters, asking them to envision the kind of president they want.
I'd ask us to just imagine the Oval Office in 3 months, okay? So just picture it in your head. So either it's Donald Trump sitting in there, stewing over his enemies list, or me, with your help, working for you, checking off my to-do list.
In the final days of this campaign, Harris making an aggressive push to reach out to independents and Republicans who are reluctant to back Trump, key voters who could determine this race. Tonight, she will pledge to be a president for all Americans, to always put country above party and above self, promising to listen to people who disagree with me, saying, unlike Donald Trump, I don't believe people who disagree with me are the enemy. He wants to put them in jail. I'll give them a seat at my table.
That was Mary Bruce reporting, and joining us now live from the Ellipse is senior White House correspondent Selena Wang. And Selena, we know Vice President Harris plans to lay out her speech like a prosecutor. What will that mean for us tonight?
This is going to be a sweeping speech from the vice president tonight, Lindsay. And the choice of location says a lot about the theme for her night. We're here at the Ellipse in D.C. This is the exact location where Donald Trump had spoken to protesters before they stormed the Capitol on January 6th. So Harris is going to make the argument that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, but she's also going to tie that argument to why the average American should care, how this impacts their day-to-day lives. She'll argue that Donald Trump is so preoccupied with his own grievances, with retribution, that he won't have time to actually care about the issues that the American people are concerned about. She'll reprise a line that she's used on the campaign trail, that while Donald Trump would work on an enemies list if he were reelected to the White House, she would be working on a to-do list for the American people. And you can see behind me the White House, and that is symbolic as well, because she's going to paint a vivid picture of what the future could look like under these two candidates. But the campaign insists that this is also going to be an optimistic and forward-looking speech, one full of hope, as she talks about her economic plan and her efforts to lower costs for Americans. And she'll also go hard on her argument around reproductive rights and abortion, Lindsay.
And Selena, as any candidate knows, speeches only take you so far. You must also turn out the vote. With 1 week to go, what's the Harris campaign's ground game looking like?
Yeah, exactly, Lindsay. At this point, it is all about the ground game. It is about turning out every single vote, getting the base excited, but they're still aggressively going after those independents and moderate Republicans as well. They want to cut into some of Donald Trump's margins in those traditionally red districts. Now, when I've been talking to the campaign and sources close to the campaign, they say that this race is really too close for comfort, that nothing seems to be moving the polls at this point. But what gives them some comfort and hope is their view that their ground game is a lot more organized. They've raised a lot more money. They've got an army of staff and volunteers that are knocking on doors, that are making phone calls. And in a race this close, they say that ground game really matters. And the campaign also believes that Harris's anti-Trump message is really resonating with some of those moderate Republicans. And in fact, up on this stage just moments ago, Lindsay, before we came up on the air, they had a couple who they say they are longtime Republicans, and they're arguing that this time around they've learned their lesson and they're voting for Vice President Harris.
And Selena, I know that we're also hearing where the vice president plans to spend election night. Give us an idea of the significance of that.
Yeah, we've just learned that she's going to be at her alma mater on election night at Howard University. We know that the vice president has deep ties to the university. She often talks about her time when she was part of the historically black sorority at Howard University. And she also wrote a letter to the university earlier this month that was published in the student newspaper. She said her time at college shaped who she is today, and that she learned at Howard that she has the capacity to be great and the work she needs to put in to reach that potential. Lindsay.
All right, Selena Wang from our nation's capital. Thanks so much, Selena. Joining us now, former U.S. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn, who faced rioters nearly 4 years ago on January 6th. He'll be there at tonight's speech. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Dunn. What must the vice president get across in her closing argument tonight if she wants to secure the White House?
And he will do it. Lindsay, thanks. So good to be with you on, as always. You know what? Outside of the message that she's going to deliver, just the symbolism right here that she's giving here, representing the last presidential, I use presidential in quotes, the presidential address given here incited an insurrection, incited a mob that went down, the people that were here went down to the Capitol and attacked me and my co-workers. Donald Trump has already pledged to be a president for only people that support him, whereas Kamala Harris Harris is all about unity, whether you support her or not. And that just shows by look how many people on the other side of the aisle that are supporting her. How many people on the opposite side of the aisle are supporting Donald Trump? It isn't many. I'm really happy that she's using this symbolism here at the Ellipse, taking it back and saying, hey, we're not standing for what happened here last time, and we're not going back to that.
How symbolic do you think that will be for voters to have her standing in the same spot where Donald Trump delivered his remarks before the Capitol insurrection?
It's powerful. I mean, regardless of your politics, majority of the people in the world feel that what happened on January 6th was wrong. So just being able to use this symbolism, it says a lot. And I'm so glad that the vice president is doing this speech here in this location to show that unity exists, that we can live together without political violence.
2/3 of voters recently polled believe that Donald Trump is not ready to accept the election outcome as legitimate if he loses. What is your response when you think about the possibility of another January 6th-like moment in this country?
Well, he's already said it. He's already said that. When he debated Joe Biden, he failed to say whether he would accept the results of the election. He was given 3 chances and he failed to do so. However, on January 6, 2025, regardless of who wins the election, we have an adult in the White House now, an adult that's not going to stand by for 3 hours should anything be going on, no matter who wins, no matter what side of the aisle is in power. And that speaks to what Joe Biden is and what Donald Trump wishes he could be.
You were there very up close on January 6th. You saw it yourself. Your response to Donald Trump recently calling that a day of love?
You know, I struggle with how to receive that comment, but Donald Trump has been saying the same thing out of his mouth for since he's been around. And I just got to the point where I don't let it bother anymore. But everybody with a half a brain knows that what happened on January 6th was not a day of love. Police officers were beaten. Over 140 officers were injured and unable to return to work. 5 officers lost their lives, and that's due to injuries they sustained and their losses with suicide. So that's anything but a day of love. But that just gives me the motivation to keep going and fighting out and pushing back against those lies that he continues to peddle.
Harry Dunn, so appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And now we want to get to our Rachel Scott, who is traveling with the Trump campaign tonight in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and files this report.
Tonight, even as his campaign grapples with the fallout from his massive rally at Madison Square Garden, Donald Trump can't stop talking about it, describing it today as a love fest.
I don't think anybody has ever seen anything like what happened the other night at Madison Square Garden. The love in that room. It was breathtaking.
But tonight, some Trump allies concerned about the racism and sexism on display from some of the speakers, including this comment about Puerto Rico.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
That speaker, invited by the Trump campaign, also making crude remarks about black people and watermelons and taking this shot at Latinos overall.
And these Latinos, they love making babies too, just know that. They do. They do.
The rest of those words too profane to play. And he wasn't the only invited speaker using racist language. Tucker Carlson mocking Kamala Harris, the first black and South Asian vice president.
Votes because she's just so impressive. As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president.
Today, the former president said it was an honor for him to be involved.
It was like a love fest, an absolute love fest, and it was my honor to be involved.
Earlier today, I spoke with Trump and asked him about the speaker his campaign invited, who called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. I don't know him, Trump told me. Someone put him up there. I don't know who he is. And when I asked Trump about the comments about Puerto Rico, he did not denounce them, saying only that he did not hear them. Democrats saying the speaker at the rally was attacking Americans.
One guy called Puerto Rico, quote, an island of garbage. Now, these are Americans. They're people. And that is the reason why this election should not be close. It should be clear.
This comes as both campaigns battle for the critical Latino vote. There are about 500,000 Puerto Ricans here in Pennsylvania, more than in any other battleground state. Today, Trump at a roundtable in Drexel Hill, getting a show of support from Maribel Valdez, who says she moved from Puerto Rico in 1981.
And I want you to know that Puerto Rico stands behind you, and Puerto Rico loves you.
Well, we love it. I know it very well. I think no president's done more for Puerto Rico than I have.
But here in Allentown, voters like Carlos Figueroa and his sister Yvette tell our Terry Moran Trump's rally struck a nerve.
So when you heard that joke, there's a floating island of garbage in Puerto Rico.
That's not a joke.
That's not a joke. How did you feel?
That's my sister. This is not a joke. We're not trash.
Yeah, we're not
trash. We're citizens as everybody up in here.
Exactly.
So we don't deserve to be called trash.
That comment has certainly lit a fire under many. Rachel Scott joins us now from Allentown. And Rachel, the Supreme Court weighed in late today about the status of RFK on several key states. Tell us what they decided.
Yeah, late word from the Supreme Court tonight, rejecting a push to try to remove Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from the ballot in two critical battleground states, Wisconsin and Michigan. Now, Kennedy, of course, was trying to get off of the ballot after he endorsed Donald Trump. He was encouraging all of his supporters to now support the former president. And Lindsay, here, Donald Trump has a rally in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Of course, this is a community with a very large Puerto Rican population as well. Some of them were outside protesting his visit today, but the former president also trying to make this appeal and reach out to this critical demographic as well, Lindsay.
Rachel Scott on the trail in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Thanks so much, Rachel. It is a symbol of American democracy, talking about the polling place. But in the past decade, more than 25,000 have vanished. And in states like Georgia, where 94% of voters use polling precincts, shunning other forms of absentee and mail-in voting, the closures of these polling stations have impacted voters in a real way. Our Steve Osunsami reports.
On this right here, everyone in rural East Georgia can agree that this just might be the most glorious sunset in the world, and that their lake is a canvas for the skies. Where they're having trouble these days is with the upcoming election and the closing of places where they've been voting for years.
The thing about it is, why disenfranchise anybody? Why close any polls? If we should be doing things right, we would be making sure that every person had a right to vote. To God be the glory.
Reverend Denise Freeman is a Baptist preacher with righteousness in her voice.
We love him. All my help comes from the Lord. I don't depend on me.
She'll tell you it's no surprise that when you take a close look at the numbers as we have, you'll find that more than 20% of American polling places have closed in the last decade.
Morning. How y'all doing?
How y'all doing?
Pastor Freeman says that with God's help, she's now leading the charge against the people in this deep red county who run the elections, who she claims are working harder than ever to keep black people from voting by closing polls.
People don't understand the hardship that they put good people in when they make stupid, unnecessary changes in policy just so they can say, I got my way, I disenfranchised them.
And she says that here's proof. After the 2020 presidential election that the blue team won, the powers here that be closed this polling precinct that's now collecting weeds and dust, and closed this one at the Old Tabernacle Baptist Church, and another here. And this is who closed them all.
All these news agencies, they were calling me. And they would say, are you black? And when I told them that I was, they were surprised.
Lavender Bolton is the director of elections in Lincoln County, and before all this, she and Reverend Freeman were old friends. So you went from how many?
7.
In 2020 to how many today?
3.
3.
And on a good year, presidential year, we might have 4,000 people to come out. Sometimes I would have a staff sitting there all day and one person come to vote. It was just no need for those many polling places.
Were people approaching you in the street?
Yes, and they were all just really mad because, oh, you just don't want black people to vote.
And this is coming from black folks?
Yes.
Did this hurt you?
It did. Yep. Because these were people that, you know, I thought I knew, but come to find out, they were totally different.
The struggle here is the same fight over voting places across America. And depending on who you ask, the reasons for closing these polls are either justifiable or cruel, financial or political.
Jurisdictions have a lot of reasons, and often they come down to money and efficiency, absolutely. But it's also true that when, these decisions get made, we don't often get an explanation for why.
Our ABC News and OWN station's data team took a hard look at the numbers and found that more than 27,000 American polling places closed between 2010 and 2022, and that the reasons weren't necessarily about color, but the impacts sometimes were.
In Missouri, for example, some of the most diverse counties in the state, like St. Louis, have seen the largest declines. In Ohio, the counties with the largest declines in polling places are among the poorest counties.
And our local stations across America are reporting that some voters are having a harder time getting to their new voting places.
And for the people who live in the far corners of the city, how are they going to get there? We don't have buses.
Claudia Zimmerman is a 76-year-old retired librarian in Cleveland, Ohio. She told our ABC affiliate there that she used to walk to her voting place before it closed. Now she needs to drive to a new one that serves more people.
We just didn't want to drive that far if we didn't have to, and so we have started voting by mail.
We did find that states where more people were voting by mail closed the most polls, but something else becomes clear when you see the numbers. We found that the closings of American polling places sped up in 2013 after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down key parts of the Voting Rights Act.
President Johnson addresses a joint session of Congress to push a voting rights bill aimed at ending discrimination.
A law born from the civil rights struggle on America's streets.
Polling places were swamped by both Negro and white voters, some of whom stood in line for up to 4 hours.
When the law changed, counties that used to need approval from federal civil rights offices to close a polling place started closing them when they wanted. And one of those counties, just east of Atlanta, was Warren, Georgia.
There were 4 voting machines all placed on this wall.
Wanda Jenkins used to vote at this Warren County fire station near her home. She now has to drive 12 miles. The voters here are majority black and brown, and they went from 6 polling places to just 1 less than a year after the 2013 Supreme Court decision.
And a lot of people feel strongly that this was done on purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, to stop black folks from voting.
Yes, I think it would have been a disadvantage more so for that group of people than any other.
Right after they closed the polls, voter turnout across Warren County fell by 12%. But county leaders insist they weren't targeting anyone. Jesse Lee Hansen says no matter the reasons, it's not fair.
In Jesus' name, amen.
After 2 strokes and a heart attack, he's asked his pastor to come get him on Election Day and drive him the now 12 miles to vote.
Me, personally, I don't understand it. I did have a little faith in politics, but I don't have no faith in politics now. No one. Can't be trusted.
There's a study that finds that when the distance to a voting place grows by even a quarter of a mile, up to 5% of voters stop going to the polls.
Where there are people who are in rural areas where transportation isn't plentiful, it creates fewer opportunities for people to be able to cast ballots. We have a better democracy where more people engage, and we should have policies that match that intention.
This is not just hurting poor and black people. This is hurting working people as well.
You gotta drive a distance unless you living right in the area
where the polling place is.
Over in Lowndes County, Alabama, 66-year-old Perman Hardy is behind the wheel trying to save the day, driving people to vote.
And on election day, I'm up about 5:30, grab me a bite to eat.
So you have a route?
I have a route. We still have people that still work on the other people's farm now that say, oh, I can't get off. I go out on that farm and pick them up on their lunch break. You got to stop to eat. So why not come go with me and let's go eat on our way to the poll? I'll bring you back. There's a lot of excuses, but I don't take excuses.
This daughter of a sharecropper drives a worn-down truck with more than 350,000 miles and a check engine light flashing.
So how long is this car going to last you?
I don't know, but I'm going to continue going.
Till the wheels fall off.
Till the wheels fall off.
Reverend Freeman in Lincoln County says she won't stop fighting to keep polls open and worries that her old friend is closing them to make someone else happy.
The Bible said truth. I've known her for a while. I just don't believe this is something she came up with at all. And I would say this to her face and have.
Lavender Bolton says it's not at all true that her county commissioners, who are white Republicans, are pressuring her to do this. And one of them told us firmly that no one is trying to suppress voters of any color. She still says that if it was up to just her, she would close 2 more polls, leaving her county with 1, which she says is enough.
We have more white voters than we do black. So all of the closings, it pretty much affected them, the whites, more than it did the blacks.
Let me just put it this way. You have people questioning your blackness.
Yes. I would never try to stop black people from voting. I would never try to stop anybody.
The argument here over polls is personal. But on this, they'll always agree that when the sun sets here on Election Day, the lake will look as glorious as ever.
Our thanks to Steve Osinsami for that. As for Perman Hardy, the woman who's been driving Alabamans to the polls for the past 30 years, she tells us she's getting her truck cleaned and ready to head out at 5:30 a.m. on Election Day. She typically drives up to 50 voters, and she expects this election year will be no different. With 1 week until the election, longtime Donald Trump ally Steve Bannon is now out of prison and right back onto the campaign trail. Bannon served 4 months for contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with a subpoena from the January 6th committee. Today, Bannon said, "I'm not broken, I'm empowered." Bannon faces additional criminal charges in New York for allegedly duping donors who gave money to build the wall along the Mexico border. He has pleaded not guilty and will be tried for those charges in December. Steve Bannon wasted no time returning to his War Room podcast, where he called himself a political prisoner today, hours after he was freed. Let's bring in our Jay O'Brien. And Jay, elaborate on what he said and explain how political prisoners has really been a running theme.
Well, think about it this way, Linsey. Steve Bannon was one of the people that was instrumental from that War Room podcast and other perches in 2020 in spreading some of those falsehoods propagated by Donald Trump and others about the 2020 election. When he returned to that podcast, fresh out of federal prison today, he said of the Democrats, quote, "They have no intention of giving up power." And then he goes on to call Republicans out to get out the vote. And then he says this effort, quote, goes from November 5th all the way to Inauguration Day, with January 6th being a key part of that. That is what Steve Bannon said fresh out of federal prison today. In terms of that phrase, political prisoner, how Bannon branded himself, we have seen the Trump campaign and other Republican allies of the Trump campaign try to recast the Capitol attack as a peaceful protest, and they have often tried to use that phrase, political prisoner, to rebrand some of the Capitol rioters, some of whom are currently incarcerated in federal prison for violent acts connected to and committed on January 6th. So Steve Bannon taking up that moniker, branding himself as a political prisoner too, and very much entering into this political nexus that he was a part of before he went away and now has reemerged out of federal prison and rejoining, trying to recast not just the lead up to January 6th, but the Capitol attack itself as something that was peaceful, Linsey.
Yeah, and explain how he really has attempted to kind of change the narrative of what happened that day.
Well, think about it this way. The Trump campaign has tried to rebrand the Capitol attack as part of their campaign strategy. Donald Trump, in one of his first rallies of 2024, came out to, as you have seen in our reporting, countless times we have played, a clip of Capitol rioters currently at that point incarcerated in the Washington, D.C. jail who were singing the national anthem. Donald Trump, on the campaign stump, has said that January 6th was a day of love in some instances. He's also called people imprisoned in connection with the Capitol attack hostages. He's also echoed, and his allies have as well, that phrase that Bannon used of being, quote unquote, political prisoners. And that is obviously a divergence, of course, from what we've seen Democrats do. Democrats have tried to remind voters over the course of this campaign of the violence on January 6th and tried to point out Trump's attempts to rewrite the history of January 6th. Though one of the many things on the line this election in some instances is how history remembers January 6th, because the Trump campaign has tried to propagate this rebranding of the Capitol attack, and Democrats have tried to highlight the violence that day and Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election and try to make it an issue that is front and center for voters.
And as for Vice President Harris, she really only has just started to lean into the Capitol riots as part of her campaign in recent weeks. Why do you think that is? I mean, even including tonight, giving the speech from the same place that Donald Trump gave his speech on the precipice of January 6th.
We've seen the campaign lean into this issue more. If you think back to Joe Biden, when he announced that he was running for re-election in that ad that was on social media first and foremost, one of the first images of that ad was video of the Capitol attack. Joe Biden said a central theme of his re-election campaign was Trump's attempts to overturn the election in 2020 and what he said was a threat to democracy posed by Donald Trump. When Kamala Harris entered this race, she talked about that issue and she talked about that messaging, but also she, as you remember from the DNC when we were both there, lean into this idea of being a joyful warrior, of the political and historic nature of her candidacy and things of that nature. Only in the final days and final weeks of this race have we seen the Harris campaign try to put front and center what they say is the threat to democracy posed by Donald Trump, campaigning with Liz Cheney, for instance, among other Republicans who say that Donald Trump poses a threat to democracy. What we've seen is them try to make that case, not to Democrats who largely agree with them, but some of those moderate Republicans, some of those Nikki Haley-type voters who could make all the difference in some swing states if they broke for Kamala Harris.
All right, Jay O'Brien, our thanks to you as always. And we still have much more to get to here on Prime tonight. A dramatic rescue of a family hanging on for dear life after their boat flipped over. But first, murder in the Hamptons, playground to the rich and famous. Hear what was discovered at a high-end resort.
ABC Election Night.
Are you ready to make your voices heard?
We will soon be a great nation again.
America, we are not going back. We fight for the future.
Our country will be greater than ever before.
Who will be your next president?
When we fight, we win.
We will make America great again.
Election night, this is where America turns for answers. ABC Election Night, live.
A Hollywood studio want us to make a movie of our podcast.
It's a fabulous cast.
Action. I'm nervous playing you. The fearlessness, the complexity.
Oh, stop. Unless you had more to say.
I don't need an algorithm to tell me that this is box office gold.
Only Murders in the Building, streaming on Hulu and for bundle subscribers on Disney+.
Hi, my name is Patrice. I am a totally cool person with a disability. Patrice always sees the best side of life. He just looked at her and I said, would you like to be my wife?
If you get married and you're collecting a Social Security benefit, your benefit will be cut.
I don't take anything for granted. I don't see what anyone can see in anyone. They're never gonna stop us from loving each other.
3, 2, 1.
24/7 life together.
It's not about the fear or the risk. It's about the love of flying. 3, 2, 1.
Did you kill Mariota?
Sorry. No, I did not kill Mariota.
This is a mystery. How did she die? They begin to do this autopsy.
It's just screaming, toxin, toxin, toxin.
Did somebody intentionally do this to her?
When the tests came back, I thought, yeah, holy, are you kidding me?
My garden club is very divided.
People think she's innocent. I think she's guilty.
Never heard of a case like this. Maybe a thriller.
I'm not buying this Little Miss Innocent game.
Little Miss Innocent. Passion, poison, prison.
I know it wasn't me. Sorry. So, if it wasn't me, who was it?
Only on Hulu.
An alarming scene in the heart of Atlanta. A man barricaded himself inside the Four Seasons Hotel, then fired at least one shot from a balcony. Here's ABC's Faith Abube on the scene with what we know.
Tonight, shots fired in Atlanta. Police swarming the busy Midtown area around 2 p.m. after a man reportedly pulled a gun on someone at the Four Seasons Hotel and Residences, barricading himself inside a residence on the 33rd floor.
Police were using drones at one point trying to find him, and we heard, I lost count, but I would say at least 24 gunshots at this point.
You see him throwing stuff over the balcony? This video showing the suspect on that balcony throwing objects to the ground. The video cutting out as he opens fire. SWAT teams evacuating multiple floors, barricading the entire block, ordering people in neighboring buildings to shelter in place.
An officer just told me that the suspect threw one of his handguns off one of the hotel balconies.
By 4:35 p.m., heavily armed police seen wheeling the bloodied suspect to an ambulance on a stretcher, taken to the hospital in stable condition.
Near the end of this episode, he did wave his hands to give up, and as he was on his balcony to say, please come get him.
And Linsey, investigators say the suspect fired multiple weapons before surrendering to police. Tonight, one officer is being treated for non-life-threatening injuries, but no other victims reported. Linsey.
Faith, thank you. Overseas now to North Gaza. Israel struck a residential building there where they say Hamas militants have returned. Local officials say nearly 100 people were killed, including 25 children, in one of the deadliest strikes of the war. This comes with just days to go and a deadline set by the Biden administration for Israel to improve the humanitarian conditions there in northern Gaza or risk losing future military aid. ABC's Britt Clennett reports from Israel tonight. Actually, we're going to come back to that in a moment. We do want to go to Kamala Harris now. You see her on the stage. We're going to listen to her in her own words as she addresses a rowdy crowd there and is preparing to approach the mic. And when she concludes, our ABC News Live team will be here to break down the details of her plan. Let's listen in.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy lives. Thank you, everyone. So listen, 1 week from today, you will have the chance to make a decision that directly impacts your life, the life of your family, and the future of this country we love. And it will probably be the most important vote you ever cast. And this election is more than just a choice between two parties and 2 different candidates. It is a choice about whether we have a country rooted in freedom for every American or ruled by chaos and division. Many of you watching have probably already cast your ballots. But I know many others are still considering who to vote for, or whether you'll vote at all. So tonight, I will speak to everyone about the choice and the stakes in this election. Look, we know who Donald Trump is. He is the person who stood at this very spot nearly 4 years ago and sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol to overturn the will of the people in a free and fair election. An election that he knew he lost. Americans died as a result of that attack. 140 law enforcement officers were injured because of that attack. And while Donald Trump sat in the White House watching as the violence unfolded on television, he was told by his staff that the mob wanted to kill his own vice president. And Donald Trump responded with 2 words: "So what?" America, that's who Donald Trump is. And that's who is asking you to give him another 4 years in the Oval Office. Not to focus on your problems, but to focus on his. And Donald Trump has told us his priorities for a second term. He has an enemies list of people he intends to prosecute. He says that one of his highest priorities is to set free the violent extremists who insulted those law enforcement officers on January 6th. Donald Trump intends to use the United States military against American citizens who simply disagree with him. People he calls, quote, the enemy from within. America, this is not a candidate for president who is thinking about how to make your life better. This is someone who is unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and out for unchecked power. Donald Trump has spent a decade trying to keep the American people divided and afraid of each other. That is who he is. But America, I am here tonight to say that is not who we are. That is not who we are. That is not who we are. You see, what Donald Trump has never understood is that e pluribus unum, out of many, one, isn't just a phrase on a dollar bill. It is a living truth about the heart of our nation. Our democracy doesn't require us to agree on everything. In fact, we like good arguments from time to time. Just think of your own family, right? It's not the American way to not have disagreements. We don't shy away from robust debate. In fact, we like a good debate, don't we? We like a good debate. And the fact that someone disagrees with us does not make them the enemy within. That's right. They are family, neighbors, classmates, co-workers. They are fellow Americans. And as Americans, we rise and fall together. America, for too long, we have been consumed with too much division, chaos, and mutual distrust. And it can be easy then to forget a simple truth. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. It is time to stop pointing fingers. We have to stop pointing fingers and start locking arms. It is time to turn the page on the drama and the conflict, the fear and division. It is time for a new generation of leadership in America. And I am ready to offer that leadership as the next President of the United States of America. Now look, let me say, I recognize this has not been a typical campaign. Even though I've had the honor of serving as your vice president for the last 4 years, I know that many of you are still getting to know who I am. Well, let me tell you, I am someone who has spent most of my career outside of Washington, D.C., so I know that not all the good ideas come from here. I am not afraid of tough fights against bad actors and powerful interests, because for decades, as a prosecutor and a top law enforcement officer of our biggest state, I won fights against big banks that ripped off homeowners, against for-profit colleges that scammed veterans and students, against predators who abused women and children, and cartels that trafficked in guns, drugs, and human beings. And I did this work because for as long as I can remember, I have always had an instinct to protect. There's something about people being treated unfairly or overlooked that frankly just gets to me. I don't like it. It's what my mother instilled in me, a drive to hold accountable those who use their wealth or power to take advantage of other people. The drive to protect hardworking Americans who aren't always seen or heard and deserve a voice. And I will tell you that is the kind of president I will be. And look, I'll be honest with you, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. But here's what I promise you. I will always listen to you, even if you don't vote for me. I will always tell you the truth, even if it is difficult to hear. I will work every day to build consensus and reach compromise to get things done. And if you give me the chance to fight on your behalf, there is nothing in the world that will stand in my way. So look, in less than 90 days, either Donald Trump or I will be in the Oval Office. Okay? On day one, if elected, Donald Trump would walk into that office with an enemies list. When elected, I will walk in with a to-do list full of priorities of what I will get done for the American people. And I will work with everyone, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, to help Americans who are working hard and still struggling to get ahead. I have been honored to serve as Joe Biden's vice president. But I will bring my own experiences and ideas to the Oval Office. My presidency will be different because the challenges we face are different. Our top priority as a nation 4 years ago was to end the pandemic and rescue the economy. Now, our biggest challenge is to lower costs that were rising even before the pandemic and that are still too high. I get it. I still remember our mother sitting at that yellow Formica table, late at night, cup of tea in hand, a pile of bills in front of her, trying to make it all work. And I've heard from so many of you who are facing even greater financial pressures. Donald Trump's answer to you is the same as it was the last time. Another $1 trillion in tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations. And this time, he will pay for it with a 20% national sales tax on everything you buy that is imported. Think about it. Clothes, food, toys, cell phones. A Trump sales tax that would cost the average family nearly $4,000 more a year. And on top of that, you will pay even more if Donald Trump finally gets his way and repeals the Affordable Care Act, which would throw millions of Americans off their health insurance and take us back to when insurance companies had the power to deny people with pre-existing conditions. Well, we are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back. Because we also know Donald Trump would deliver tax cuts to his billionaire donors. I will deliver tax cuts to working people and the middle class. I will make sure you have a chance not just to get by, but to get ahead. Because I believe in honoring the dignity of work. I will enact the first ever federal ban on price gouging on groceries. Cap the price of insulin and limit out-of-pocket prescription costs for all Americans. I will fight to make sure that hardworking Americans can actually afford a place to live. I'll never forget how our mother saved up and how excited she was when she could finally afford to buy our first home. I remember how excited she was. And I know that owning a home is not only a measure of financial security, it's about the pride of your hard work. And as president, I will fight to help first-time home buyers with your down payment, take on the companies that are jacking up rents, and build millions of new homes. For years, we have heard excuses about why America can't build enough housing. Enough with the excuses. I'm going to cut the red tape and work with the private sector and local governments to speed up building and get it done. And the cost of housing isn't the only financial pressure on middle-class families. I have met so many young people who have a natural desire to parent their children well, but not always the resources to do it. So I'll fight for a child tax credit to save them some money, which will also lift American children out of poverty. I'll work to lower the cost of childcare, which is out of reach for too many working families today. And for too many people in the sandwich generation who are raising young children and taking care of a parent, juggling all of it is extremely difficult. You know, I took care of my mother when she got sick, cooking food that she had a taste for, finding clothes that would not irritate her skin. And understand, as I do, that caregiving is about dignity. It is about dignity. And currently, if you need home care and you don't have some money to hire someone, you and your family need to deplete your savings to qualify for help. That's just not right. So we're going to change the approach and allow Medicare to cover the cost of home care so seniors can get the help and care they need in their own homes. Now, Donald Trump has a different approach. He tried to cut Medicare and Social Security every year he was president. Look, I believe that when people have worked hard their entire life, they deserve to retire with the benefits they have earned. And I believe in the fundamental freedom of Americans to make decisions about their own bodies and not have their government tell them what to do. I will fight to restore what Donald Trump and his hand-selected Supreme Court justices took away from the women of America. Today, 1 in 3 women in America, think about it, 1 in 3 women in America lives in a state with a Trump abortion ban, many with no exceptions even for rape and incest. The idea that a woman who survives a crime of a violation to her body should not have the authority to make a decision about what happens to her body next, that is immoral. That is immoral, and Trump's not done. He would ban abortion nationwide, restrict access to birth control and put IVF treatments at risk, and force states to monitor women's pregnancies. Just Google Project 2025 and read the plans for yourself. And look, I think we all know one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to simply agree the government should not be telling her what to do with her body. Not the government. And when Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom nationwide, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. And look, on another subject, politicians have got to stop treating immigration as an issue to scare up votes in an election. And instead, treat it as the serious challenge that it is that we must finally come together to solve. I will work with Democrats and Republicans to sign into law the border security bill that Donald Trump killed. When I was Attorney General of a border state, I saw the chaos and violence caused by transnational criminal organizations that I took on. And when I am president, we will quickly remove those who arrive here unlawfully, prosecute the cartels, and give Border Patrol the support they so desperately need. At the same time, we must acknowledge we are a nation of immigrants. And I will work with Congress to pass immigration reform, including an earned path to citizenship for hardworking immigrants like farm workers and our dreamers. As Commander-in-Chief, I will make sure America has the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has shown his contempt for our nation's heroes, calls them suckers and losers, called a 4-star Marine general a, quote, lowlife, I will always honor, never denigrate, the service and sacrifice of our troops and their families, and fulfill our sacred obligation to care for them. I will strengthen, not surrender, America's global leadership. And I will stand with our friends because I know that our alliances keep American people safe and make America stronger and more secure. Look, world leaders think that Donald Trump is an easy mark. Easy to manipulate with flattery or favor. And you can believe that autocrats like Putin and Kim Jong-un are rooting for him in this election. I will always uphold our security, advance our national interest, and ensure that the United States of America remains, as we must forever be, a champion of liberty around the world. America, we know what Donald Trump has in mind. More chaos, more division, and policies that help those at the very top and hurt everyone else. I offer a different path, and I ask for your vote. And here is my pledge to you. I pledge to seek common ground and common sense solutions to make your life better. I am not looking to score political points. I am looking to make progress. I pledge to listen to experts, to those who will be impacted by the decisions I make, and to people who disagree with me. Unlike Donald Trump, I don't believe people who disagree with me are the enemy. He wants to put them in jail. I'll give them a seat at the table. I pledge to you to approach my work with the joy and optimism that comes from making a difference in people's lives. And I pledge to be a president for all Americans. And to always put country above party and self. I love our country with all my heart. And I believe in its promise because I've lived it. I grew up as a child of the Civil Rights Movement. My parents would take me to marches in a stroller, where crowds of people of all races, faiths, and walks of life came together to fight for the ideals of freedom and opportunity. I've lived the promise of America. I saw how hard our mother worked to give her daughters the same chances this country gave her. Growing up, I was blessed to have family by blood and family by love, who instilled in me the values of community, compassion, and faith that have always defined our nation at its best. I've lived the promise of America. I've spent my life fighting for the people who have been hurt and counted out, but never stopped believing that in our country, anything is possible. I've lived the promise of America, and I see the promise of America in all of you. In all of you. I see it in the young people who are voting for the first time, who are determined to live free from gun violence and to protect our planet and to shape the world they inherit. refuse to accept a future without reproductive freedom. And the men who support them. I see it in Republicans who have never voted for a Democrat before, but have put the Constitution of the United States over party. I've seen it in Americans different in many respects, but united in our pursuit of freedom, our belief in fairness and decency, and our faith in a better future. America, I know the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. I know it. And that's why I am in this race, to fight for the people, just like I always have. Nearly 250 years ago, America was born when we wrested freedom from a petty tyrant. Across the generations, Americans have preserved that freedom, expanded it, and in so doing, proved to the world that a government of, by, and for the people is strong and can endure. And those who came before us, the patriots at Normandy and Selma, Seneca Falls and Stonewall, on farmlands and factory floors, they did not struggle, sacrifice, and lay down their lives only to see us cede our fundamental freedoms. They didn't do that only to see us submit to the will of another petty tyrant. These United States of America, we are not a vessel for the schemes of wannabe dictators. The United States of America is the greatest idea humanity ever devised. A nation big enough to encompass all our dreams, strong enough to withstand any fracture or fissure between us, and fearless enough to imagine a future of possibilities. So America, let us reach for that future. Let us fight for this beautiful country we love. And in 7 days, we have the power, each of you has the power to turn the page and start writing the next chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told. I thank you all. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
And there she is, Vice President Kamala Harris, making her final bid to the American people, her closing argument there at the Ellipse, the very spot where Donald Trump spoke to those in attendance for his rally on January 6th before the insurrection at the Capitol. We heard her say that I pledge to approach my work with joy and optimism and to always put country and party above self. She really leaned into the idea that Donald Trump plans a presidential term of retribution, calling him unstable, obsessed with revenge, and out for unchecked power. She called him on a few occasions a petty tyrant. She's saying we must acknowledge that we are a nation of immigrants. It is time to stop pointing fingers and start locking arms. But there you see her with the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, as they walk around to see the crowd and waving their goodbyes. I want to say that I'm happy now to have Mississippi Representative Benny Thompson with us, who himself is seeking his 16th term. Representative Thompson, thank you so much for joining us. You, of course, were the chair of the House January 6th committee, have advised Vice President Harris on how she should characterize former President Trump's actions that day at all?
Well, I tell you what, as you know, as you indicated, I did the January 6th. But what you heard tonight was the difference between someone who's looking ahead and someone who looking in the rearview mirror. And so I'm absolutely excited about the speech, and I had nothing to do with writing it, but I couldn't have written it any better.
Your reaction to her words tonight?
Well, let me tell you, it's about the future. I know a lot about Donald Trump that my committee's work uncovered. It was not good. If he's given another opportunity to run this country, he will be the dictator that he's saying to a lot of people. When he says, I want to be a dictator for a day, believe him. The work of our committee uncovered a lot of things that you would not do in a democracy. Donald Trump would not be a positive force for the greatest democracy known to man. And so what you saw tonight, I'm convinced, is the difference between someone who loves this country and loves the people in it versus someone that's basically all about themselves and not this country.
And Congressman, the vice president was caught on a hot mic this weekend telling Governor Whitmer of Michigan that the campaign must do better with men. Why do you think that former President Trump has a 10-point lead over Harris when it comes to male voters?
Well, you know, this is America, and she's the first woman other than Hillary to be a serious contender, to be the commander-in-chief. We still have some idiosyncrasies in this country about women leading. That's unfortunate, but it's reality. I look forward to women leading. They've helped men get us to be the #1 country in the world. Now it's their time. But that hot mic, for whatever it's worth, I believe is correct. We have to go after every demographic if you're going to win. And so for the vice president to be caught saying that, a lot of people are voicing it also. So we have to work. It's not just black men, it's men in general.
But speaking of going after those specific demographics, is there a pitch that you've been making to black voters, black men in particular, on why they should support Kamala Harris?
Well, I think the policies that she's articulating make a lot of sense. They have, for the most part, moving the economic needle. You know, the single largest investment most people make in their life is in a home. And so if you are not in a position to buy a home, you're in trouble. So why not, in this great country of ours, create an opportunity for people to become homeowners? We have to have families that can afford childcare. People who are above 60 years of age or older, who are challenged with some health issues, we need to help. There are too many families becoming bankrupt because of health care. Why would you want to get rid of the best health care program that we've had since Medicare and Medicaid, and that's the Affordable Care Act? Donald Trump tried hard to get rid of it. John McCain helped save it. And so we have to do better. We should not punish people who've worked all their lives just because they're not rich. But they took care of families, and they've made this country the greatest country in the world. So I'm excited about what I heard, this notion that somehow the Trump administration can demonize people and make them somehow feel less than human, would reward him with being president. It's just unfathomable. And so I'm excited about what I heard. As you know, when former President Trump spoke at the same location, he encouraged American citizens to go to the Capitol and attack the people who were trying to order the peaceful transfer of power. That's not who we are. We're a better country than that. And I hope the work of our committee shared for the entire public what actually happened. I chose Liz Cheney as my chair because I didn't want it to be political. And to Liz's credit, she did a good job. But that being said, even some of my Republican colleagues who spoke out against what was going on, who spoke out against the president, they've lost their strength to be adults. They've succumbed to the bullying of the Trump administration and MAGA Republicans, and that's so unfortunate. What I heard tonight was someone who's prepared to lead, someone who's prepared to put seats at the table with people they don't necessarily agree with. But for the most part, it's moving forward, accepting our differences and taking those differences and making them our strengths.
Congressman Benny Thompson from Mississippi, we so appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Joining us once again is Selena Wang, our senior White House correspondent. And Selena, you've heard many speeches from the vice president. Was there anything that you noted was different about this one?
Look, the vice president tonight, even though this is a crowd of tens of thousands of people, this was a pretty intimate and conversational speech that she gave to the American people tonight. And she laid out the stakes of this election in sweeping terms. She talked about how this isn't just an election about two different candidates from two different parties. She argued that this is about the country continuing in the direction of freedom on the fundamental ideals that America was built upon, or it's an alternative future that's ruled by chaos and division. And Linsey, what makes this really different from all of the Harris rallies I've been to is the symbolism of where we are. We're at the Ellipse. This is exactly where Donald Trump spoke to protesters before they mobbed the Capitol on January 6th. And Vice President Harris gave her message of unity and the future that she envisions with the backdrop of the White House. So she painted a very vivid picture to Americans about what it would be like for her to be sitting in the Oval Office versus Donald Trump. And Linsey, she really hit on all of the points here that people care about in this election. She talked about the economy. She talked about abortion, reproductive health rights. She talked about child care, the expensive cost of child care, and what she'd want to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods and the cost of child care. And she also talked about immigration and the border. But she ended on this message that although people may not agree with her, she promises the American people that she is going to fight for them. And that is really what she ended on, Linsey.
And she talked about Donald Trump being a petty tyrant, saying that his presidency, if he were to win, would be one of retribution. Do you feel at all that the setting of the Ellipse there, the same place where former President Trump spoke to his supporters on January 6th, brought something different out of her?
Yeah, I really think that she leaned into arguments that we haven't heard before. I think what you brought up, the petty tyrants, we haven't often heard her use that kind of language, but we have seen Harris in this final stretch of the campaign really lean into this anti-Trump message that he is simply unfit to sit in the Oval Office, and that the decisions he makes are rooted in his own desires and his own grievances and retribution. She reinforced this idea that Donald Trump is easily influenced by dictators through favors or through these petty favors. And that is an argument that she continued to lead into tonight. And she also brought up her personal story as well, Linsey. And there was one point I wrote down in my notes because I thought that was interesting. She said that she doesn't like it when she sees people being treated unfairly or overlooked. She said, frankly, that just gets to me, and that her mother instilled in her a drive to hold accountable those who use their wealth or power to take advantage of other people. That's a personal touch we haven't really heard her bring to the table before.
Right, an instinct to protect, she said. All right, Selena Wang, our thanks to you as always. With 7 days left until the election, let's now hear from former President Trump, unfiltered in his own words. And when he concludes, our ABC News Live team will be here to check the facts and break down the details of his plans. Let's listen in.
Giant rallies. I love the rallies. Sometimes they'll have me do like a Q&A. I'd get to a place and there'll be a Q&A, and I'll say, gee, I love those rallies. I don't know, it invigorates all of us, right? Everyone here. And we're only going to be doing them for like a few more days, and then we have a different kind of get-together. We're going to have a get-together where we're going to talk about all the good things we're doing. It's going to be a very positive thing. But this is something that's been a special journey for all of us. I think for all of us. You have people that have been to hundreds of these. You have people that have been, you have the front row Joes, they've been to everyone. I think, look at these guys. They've been to everyone. And it's just special. And, you know, all my geniuses backstage, they think it's them. Oh, they did. I said, take a regular guy, take a regular politician. Let's see how many. So what's going to happen is in 4 years, somebody's going to be running for president. They're going to hire these guys because they think they're great. And they're going to come and they're going to do a rally, and there'll be about 300 people show up. Because that's the standard. If you took the greatest politician in the United States in history and you said, we're going to make a speech in Pennsylvania tonight, you'd have 300, 200, maybe 400 people if they were great. We get every time 25, 30, 40,000 people, 100,000 people in Butler. 110,000 people in California, where the elections are so rigged, it's disgusting. We were out there, we had 110,000 people in California 3 weeks ago, 110,000. We had in New Jersey, 107,000 people. But that Butler rally was something special, I would tell you. That was something. That was special for a lot of reasons. And if these companies don't make their products here, then they will pay a very stiff tariff when they send their products into the United States for the privilege of competing with our workers and our protected companies. We're going to protect our companies, and we're going to protect through very strong tariffs. We're going to protect our whole system. And by the way, China does it and others do it. But we can do it better because we have a better product. We have a better product. The product is the USA. We have a great product. And we'll also pass the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act. That means if China or any other country, it's not only China, it's everybody ripping us off. We changed it a lot. We changed it a lot. We renegotiated South Korea's deal, Japan's deal. We were in the process of the European Union. I'll tell you what, the European Union sounds so nice, so lovely, right? All the nice European little countries, they get together. They're brutal. They don't take our cars. They don't take our farm products. They sell millions and millions of cars in the United States. No, no, no. They are going to have to pay a big price. And, you know, just like I stopped that plant that was going to be built in Mexico, biggest plant in the world going to be built. And I said, and I was in Detroit at the Economic Forum, at the Economic Club, and I said, you know, they're going to build the biggest plant there. It's going to wipe out all of Michigan. Michigan is, I mean, we're way up tonight in Michigan. You know why? Because of things like that. Because if they built that plant, then Detroit and Michigan as a whole, I don't think they made as many cars as this one monster plant that was owned by China. It was near the border. They were going to make millions of cars and just keep sending them into our country and destroy our jobs, destroy our whole market. We already lost about 65% from the heyday. We're going to bring it back to the heyday. We're going to bring it back, and we can do it so easily and so smartly. And I said, I'm going to put tariffs on those cars. And if 100% isn't enough, I'll make it to. They're not going to have one car come into the United States. They'll be sitting there with all these cars and never coming in because all they're going to do is destroy our automobile manufacturing business. And you know what happened? Today, the guy that built it, the other day, he calls me up. I see him. I say, what's happening with that plant? He's the biggest builder of these auto plants. I said, I want to see one. He said, you'll have to come to Mexico. I said, I want to go to Mexico. I want to see one here. He said, we're not building them in the United States. We're building them in Mexico. I said, who owns them? China. I see, so China now, in order to save the trip, is going to build them and then really knock the hell out of a car, which they're doing in Europe, by the way. They're killing them in Europe. I said, not going to happen. I said, I don't want to see it. I don't have to see it. How big is it? He said, the biggest in the world. I said, all right, let them know that I'm putting a 100% tariff on every car that they make. And if that's not enough, I'll double it. And I forgot about it. This was about 6, 7 months ago, and I forgot about it. Then I was making a speech the other day, and I see the same guy. He's the biggest builder of auto plants. That's all he wants to do is, if you told him build an apartment, he wouldn't know how to do it. But an auto plant, fully computerized. I see him at the speech that I'm making in Detroit, and I call him over after I finish. I said, John, let me ask you, how's that big monster doing in Mexico? He said, oh, sir, they canceled it last week because they think you're going to be elected president and you're going to put tariffs on. How about that? Is that beautiful? They canceled it. But if Kamala got in, they would restart it very quickly, believe me. She doesn't exactly think too much about that stuff, does she? If China or any other countries charge us a 100 or 200% tax, then we will charge them. This is the reciprocal act that we're calling it. I'll put my name on it if they want, or I'll leave my name off. I couldn't care less, but we're going to have a reciprocal tax. We're going to charge them the same 100 or 200% tariff or tax. Called an eye for an eye. And all of the ripoff will stop immediately. I will never apologize for defending America, but isn't that a beautiful story with the plant? I mean, if Michigan didn't vote, wouldn't I be surprised? We have a big lead in Michigan, by the way, a very big lead. We have a big lead in Arizona. We have a big lead, and the fake news won't tell you, but you'll see it hopefully on Tuesday night. But by the way, you got to get out and vote, otherwise I would be very embarrassed. This is all subject to you voting. You vote. It's not, we don't have a problem in the world. But great, we're doing great in Nevada. We're doing great in Arizona. We're doing great, really good in North Carolina. How about the people of North Carolina? They showed up to vote in record numbers, and the place was practically demolished by Hurricane Helene. I was worried about that. I said, North Carolina, we thought maybe 50%, maybe 40 or 30% would show up. More people showed up to vote for this election than any election in the history of North Carolina. Is that right, thus far? Can you believe it? They set a record. And they're voting for Trump. But I'll protect our workers. I'll protect our jobs. I will protect our borders. I will protect our families. And I will protect the birthright of our children to live in the richest and most powerful nation on the face of the earth. And as we rescue our economy, I will also restore our borders. Over the past 4 years, Kamala orchestrated the most egregious betrayal that any leader in American history has inflicted upon its people. She allowed this to happen to us. She allowed us to be invaded. We were invaded. This was a massive invasion of criminals. She has violated her oath, eradicated our sovereign border, and unleashed an army of migrant gangs who are waging a campaign of violence and terror against our citizens. It's vicious what's happened. They're killing our people. Kamala has imported criminal migrants from prisons and jails, insane asylums and mental institutions from all around the world, from Venezuela to the Congo, the Congo. They're supplying lots. They're taking them out of their jails. They're opening up their jails, and they're busing them. They can't get enough buses, frankly, because I'm shocked. Venezuela is only about 60% empty. Do you know that Venezuelan crime is down 72%? You know why? Because their criminals are being taken into the United States of America. It's like, I said this, the press gave me a hard time on this one. They said it was very, no, I don't think it's disrespectful. It's like we're a giant garbage can. That's what they treat us like. And these are killers. These are drug dealers. These are gangs, gang members. These are some of the worst people. These are terrorists. And they're treating us and dumping. They're dumping like we're a dumping ground. And it includes savage criminals who assault, rape, and murder our women and our girls. And then they say, oh, my people said, sir, please don't say that. What? You're going to protect the women. It sounds very like, I said, well, don't they want protection? I think they want protection. No, don't. Sure, it doesn't sound good. Doesn't sound good. I'm going to protect our women from criminals coming into our country and going up to the suburbs and doing really bad things. We're going to protect our men, our women, our children. We're going to protect our country. 100% protect our country. But they said it sounds terrible. It sounds so terrible when you say they can take care of themselves. So no. When you see MS-13 coming through your front door, you're not taking care of yourself. And your husband's not going to take care of you too good either, believe me. And she wants to take your guns away. We're not taking your guns away ever. Are there any women in this giant, massive arena that do not want protection? Please raise your hand. Do women want to be protected? Anyone who would let monsters kidnap and kill our children does not belong anywhere near the Oval Office. Doesn't belong. Today, I want America to hear directly from a mother whose world has been shattered forever by Kamala. This is difficult to watch. I had a group of people watching it. It's a difficult thing to watch, but this is what's happening in our country thousands and thousands of times. Please watch.
Sunday night, I asked her to not stay up super late because of her coming to work with me in the morning to do her summer school. She said, okay. I told her good night and I love you. I went to bed, not realizing that that was going to be the last time I saw her.
We're best friends. Yeah.
We're going to shake it again. I woke up to notice she wasn't in her bed. I'm in my heart trying not to lose my mind because I don't know where she is. I finally remembered her phone had a location on, and her phone was pinging just 2 minutes down the road, right behind the skate park. I start driving to the direction the phone was being pinged at, and I see a couple cop cars with lights on. I see yellow tape. And immediately my heart drops and sinks to the bottom of my stomach. My daughter's hands and ankles were both bound. She was strangled to death, left with no pants. And I know in my heart, she fought incredibly hard. She was not going down without a fight.
We begin with two men we're learning are charged with capital murder tonight, accused of killing a 12-year-old girl.
Police say these men strangled her before dumping her into that creek. Both men were in the country illegally.
Apprehended, then released by Border Patrol less than 3 weeks before Jocelyn's death. The men accused of killing Jocelyn Nungare are affiliated with the gang known for brutal violence.
Kamala Harris was in charge of immigration in our borders. If we had better border policies and not open borders and not these catch and release policies, I truly believe this all could have been prevented. Under her being vice president of this country, my daughter's life was ripped away from her. She had her entire life ahead of her.
Happy birthday, dear Jocelyn.
My daughter is 6 feet in the ground based off of policies that she allowed to keep. Kamala Harris did have one job, and she not only failed, not me, she failed my daughter, she failed Jocelyn. she was only 12. President Trump reached out, gave me his sincerest condolences as not a former president, but just as a father, someone who cares. I believe Donald Trump needs to be back in office. I can at least know that my next child will be safe in this country.
Oh, boy. That's a tough one. What a beautiful woman and what a beautiful child, and that child is no longer with us. It's just like crazy. And what they did to her, So, and you have so many others. Laken Riley. You have so many others. I could name 15 others right now, but they have thousands of them. Should be like that. You have thousands of cases like that. Many young girls, but many people are being killed by the people that come in illegally through an open border. The day I take the oath of office, the migration and this horrible migrant invasion ends, and the restoration of our country begins, and it begins in a very strong way. The savages charged with brutalizing and murdering precious Jocelyn are members of the same vicious Venezuelan prison gang, Tren de Aragua, that has taken over apartment complexes and unleashing a violent killing spree all over America. They're all over America. In Colorado, they've taken over big complexes. The governor is a radical left Democrat who's petrified. He doesn't know what to do. They have the weapons of a fine military. They've even taken over recently Times Square in New York. Please take a look.
Open borders.
Across America. It is a full-blown invasion.
Armed Venezuelan gang members storming an apartment complex in Aurora, Colorado.
When people talk about lack of crime, this is what they're talking about.
San Antonio, Texas, just one of the latest cities to have apartment complexes taken over by members of the Venezuelan gang.
Biden and Harris had created a program to bring them in under humanitarian parole.
I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals.
More than 13,000 illegal immigrants convicted of murder have been released into the United States.
My 20-year-old daughter, Kayla Hamilton, was murdered in her own room. Kayla's murderer was apprehended by Border Patrol crossing illegally into the U.S.
Kayla's murderer had been improperly released into the United States.
Abolish ICE. Yeah, we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
More than a dozen people suspected of being Tren de Aragua gang members right here in San Antonio.
The gang members had been terrorizing the apartment complex.
New details in the murder of Laken Riley. The illegal immigrant suspect who cops say committed the heinous murder is a Venezuelan national.
And was paroled and released into the country by the Biden administration.
If they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened.
2 men investigators say are in the country illegally from Venezuela are charged with capital murder in the death of Jocelyn Nungaray.
Martinez and Angel wrapped his arms around Jocelyn's neck, took off her pants, and climbed on top of her. Later strangled Jocelyn to death and then tied up her hands and feet.
Court documents suggest a group of men arrested for beating and robbing a Dallas woman last month are members of a Venezuelan street gang.
The men threatened to cut off her fingers if she did not cooperate. Manuel Hernandez was booked by Colleyville police just 2 days earlier and released the day before the robbery.
A Peruvian gang leader who is wanted for 23 murders. He was arrested by Border Patrol near Roma, Texas, then released into America.
This is what we're allowing into our country through these open borders. The United States is now an occupied country, whether you like it or not. We're an occupied country. Thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of these people. But it will soon be an occupied country no longer. On November 5th, 2024, liberation of America begins. On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. We're going to get them out. I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered, and we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail or kick them the hell out of our country fast. To expedite approvals of Tren de Aragua and MS-13, an equally savage gang. I took out thousands of them during my administration, thousands. And you know who's great? ICE and Border Patrol, they're great. But in order to do what we have to do, I will invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Think of that. 1798, that's how far back we have to go. To target and dismantle every migrant criminal network operating on American soil, and we will do it so fast. And if they come back into our country, it's an automatic 10 years in jail with no possibility of parole. And I am hereby calling for the death penalty for any migrant that kills an American citizen or a law enforcement officer. Under Kamala, America is a sanctuary for criminal, illegal aliens. It's what it is. These sanctuary cities are just unbelievable. They're sanctuaries for criminals, not anybody else. I will immediately ban all sanctuary cities in the United States of America, immediately. I will end catch and release. I will end all migrant flights into our country with planes loaded up with criminal migrants. And I will ban all welfare and federal benefits for illegals, and then they won't come. Kamala's gross incompetence disqualifies her from being president of the United States. She is unfit for office. Everyone knows it. No one respects her. No one trusts her. No one takes her seriously. Everyone knows she is a low IQ individual. You know that. Low IQ. From humiliating.
All right, there you have Donald Trump. He is in the middle of talking about Vice President Kamala Harris, saying that she has gross incompetence, that she's unfit for office, that she has a low IQ. He talked for a bit tonight about crowd size, all the number of people who have attended his rallies in recent days, and then talked about how he was going to put 100% or perhaps 200% tariffs on cars coming in from outside of the country. He went on to promise that he will protect our country and blame Kamala Harris for massive invasion of criminals. What he said was violent gangs that are killing our people, importing criminals from prisons and jails and insane asylums. He said it's like we are a giant garbage can, referring to our country. I want to bring in Jay O'Brien. And Jay, former President Trump mentioned voter fraud in Lancaster and York counties in Pennsylvania. Explain what he was talking about there.
Yeah, what he was referring to was two instances we have seen in both of those counties in this key state of Pennsylvania, but he's making the leap to say that they were active incidents of voter fraud, or that if there was fraud, it would determine the outcome of the election. And here's what we mean. Let's take them both one by one. First, Lancaster County. ABC News can confirm that in Lancaster County, elections officials there did get 2,500 or so ballot applications, not ballots filled out, but applications to get a ballot, that the county says appear to have been filled out fraudulently. And they were able to catch that, they say, because they've got signature matching technology, among other technologies, that were able to review these ballots. And they say they caught them. No one got a ballot in a fraudulent way, and that they say this is an example of the system working. That's what Trump's talking about when he talks about Lancaster. When he's talking about York County officials say that they got another large-scale request for ballots, another bunch of applications. They are in the midst of processing those applications, applying similar and, in some instances, the same technology that Lancaster County used, and that if there is any impropriety or any illegality, they will, of course, address that. But these applications aren't just getting sent into county offices and then this individual or whoever's filling them out in a fraudulent way, perhaps get a ballot back, as Trump is alleging here. So there isn't this kind of fraud to the degree that Trump is alleging. One more thing when we talk about a fact check here. You mentioned those claims of former President Trump about undocumented immigrants committing crime in this country. There is, of course, as we often reference here, a Department of Justice funded study that finds that undocumented immigrants commit crimes about half of the rate of native-born American citizens. And when you talk about that specific case that Trump was referencing, that he played the ad of Jocelyn Nagari, which is in Texas, there's something to note here, which is that ad tries to tie this case directly to Kamala Harris and the Biden administration. And the facts of the matter are that those two individuals that are suspected of committing that heinous, awful crime, they were detained and arrested at the U.S.-Mexico border, and then they were released back into the United States awaiting a court date. That is what happens oftentimes with undocumented immigrants who go to the border and claim things like asylum. They are released in the United States, and then they stay in the United States expecting a court date. Donald Trump has said that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden created that system. But what Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have said, among other things, is that Donald Trump tanked a bipartisan immigration deal that would have, A, added enforcement at the southern border, but B, tried to quicken that asylum process so that people don't have to be released into the United States and can quickly go through the legally required asylum process to vet their asylum claims. Linsey.
And Jay, former advisor Steve Bannon was released from prison today, just days before the election, and he's warning that there could be a reprise of 2020. Explain what he's talking about.
Yeah, his words specifically were referring to what he thinks Donald Trump should do again. So Steve Bannon in federal prison for 4 months on contempt of Congress charges for defying a subpoena from the January 6th committee. And when he got out, he went on to his podcast. He mentioned January 6th of this year, talking about potential plans for the election and potential plans to fight results that he would not view as legitimate. And this, of course, would be results that were not favorable to Donald Trump. And then he suggested that Donald Trump should go out at, as Steve Bannon says, 11 o'clock or so on election night and declare victory essentially no matter what. And it's a common theme we've heard from those in Trump's inner circle of saying that because they are seeing what they view as positive poll numbers and positive early voting numbers, although every single poll shows this race neck and neck, that any result that is not to their liking, in their view, would equal, as a lot of them alleged in 2020, election fraud. And that's why they're pushing Donald Trump, as Bannon is, to declare victory early, Linsey.
And, of course, tonight, Harris tried to send a symbolic message by giving her speech where Trump spoke right before the Capitol riot. What were some of the biggest takeaways from her speech tied to January 6th?
It's interesting. She only mentioned January 6th directly once, meaning she only used the term January 6th once. And then she goes on to talk about Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election. She said to the American people a version of "this is who Donald Trump is," trying to contrast that with who she says she is and the threat that she says Donald Trump poses to American democracy. Another thing that she mentioned that stuck out to me from our reporting over the last few months is she says Donald Trump has promised to pardon January 6th defendants. And that is true, Linsey. I can tell you in our reporting over the course of the last few months, I've talked to January 6 defendants and their families who say that either they or their families have heard from Donald Trump directly, or in some cases those in his orbit, and he has promised them a pardon. And some of them tell me they are waiting behind bars right now, convicted on charges related to the Capitol attack, for a pardon from Donald Trump, Linsey.
And Jay, how did their messages on the economy differ tonight? Trump, of course, still talking about 100%, potentially 200% tariffs on some goods like cars.
Yeah, and what Harris tried to do is seize on those comments about tariffs, for instance, and try to brand them as a tax hike. We've seen Democrats try to do that in recent days, saying, in a sense, that because Donald Trump wants these tariffs, they will trickle down to the consumer. What Donald Trump has said is because those tariffs would be beneficial to the American economy, that they would ultimately end up benefiting the consumer. That's the difference in economic messaging there, particularly on tariffs. But when you talk about the overall economic messaging, it's just painting two very different pictures of the American economy. What Kamala Harris has said is, look, and as she said tonight, there is work to be done to bring down prices and to address making this a more equal economy for all. But the economy, in Kamala Harris's speech tonight and other things she said on the trail, is by every metric we've seen at ABC News, for instance, solid. There's a solid jobs market. The stock market is up, et cetera, et cetera. What Donald Trump has tried to say is that those positive metrics for the economy, in his view, are an illusion in that those positive numbers are not trickling down to the consumer. We know, Linsey, that the economy is the top issue for every single voter, or I would say most voters we see in the polls, 80 to 90% or so, depending upon the poll that you're looking at. So the reality is, while the numbers may say one thing, the true test of how Americans feel about this economy will largely be borne out on Election Day, November 5th.
Marco Rubio there at the mic right now. All right, Jay O'Brien, our thanks to you. And joining us now, ABC News contributor and the former mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, and ABC News contributor and editor, National Review, Ramesh Ponnuru. Thank you both so much for joining us. Stephanie, let's start with you. What did you make of the split screen tonight, listening to the Harris rally and now some of Trump?
Split screen was crazy to me. When I looked at Madam Vice President, I got goosebumps. She did what she came to do. She looked presidential. She sounded presidential. She gave a message that was rooted in hope and optimism about where our country could go. And I literally got goosebumps. And those goosebumps turned into anxiety when I saw former President Trump on that stage. The way that he uses fear and division and otherizes people, the way that he is committed to lies about, what the migrant community does in our country, and the way that he manipulated the horrible story of that young woman who lost her life to bolster claims that we know are not true. It is horrible to see the way that he's done that, and it makes me hope that Madam Vice President is true and accurate when she says this is not who we are. I am prayerful that this is not who we are. That the way that people are cheering for those messages that are rooted in hate and racism. I'm just hoping that the crowds that I see around the country for Madam Vice President really show out on the polls and are ready for a new song, a new day in this country.
Ramesh, which candidate do you think is making a more effective closing argument?
You know, we are at the point in the campaign where we have moved from persuasion to mobilization. I think we saw that in both of these candidates, who are giving pretty familiar versions of themselves out there. In Trump's case, I think kind of the greatest hits and doing a fair amount of rambling. In Harris's case, I think taking a bunch of the arguments that she's made in this short campaign of hers and stitching them together and kind of sprucing them up a bit. I frankly am not sure. We've got such a small universe of voters who are still deciding whether they're going to vote, still deciding who they're going to vote for. And it's really, it's just very tight. And I think that there's nothing really that either one of them said that I think is going to move the needle much.
And Stephanie, I don't want to read too much into this, but President Biden was in your city today. Vice President Harris made it a point to distance herself a little from Biden, saying that she will have a different presidency. He also hasn't been on the campaign trail with her in recent days. Do you think that there's a strategy here?
I think the strategy is to remind people that she is currently the vice president, not the president, and to make sure that people know that she is going to be her own person. We have a fantastic president right now. President Biden has served with distinction, and we are thankful for him. And we're also thankful, I'm thankful, that he was an American strong enough to pass the baton. And that is what Madam Vice President is saying, that she accepts the baton and she is moving forward.
And Ramesh, 7 days to go. Is this a jump ball in your estimation?
Absolutely. I think the economy and the immigration issue both favor Trump, but Trump's personality favors Harris. That's the contest I see.
All right. We thank you both so much for joining us. Really appreciate you coming on the show tonight. Ramesh Ponnuru, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, thank you. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?